He wasn't a king. He wasn't a Khan. But he conquered 32 nations and destroyed 65 armies. His name was Subutai, and he was the reason the world once believed the Mongols were demons sent from the underworld. Forget what you think you know about Genghis Khan. While Genghis was the visionary, the unifier, the great Khan, there was another man, a shadow at his side, who was the true architect of the Mongol Empire's unstoppable military machine. This is the story of Subutai, the greatest general you've never heard of. Our story begins not in a palace, but in the harsh and forgiving wilderness of the Siberian taiga. Subutai was born into the Uriankai tribe, a humble family of reindeer herders and blacksmiths. He wasn't nobility. He had no claim to power, no birthright to command. His father, a blacksmith named Jarkudai, taught him the value of hard work, patience, and the art of shaping metal. But young Subutai was destined to shape something far greater, the destiny of empires. When Subutai was just a teenager, he made a decision that would change his life, and the world forever. He left his family and traveled to join the rising warlord, Temujin, who would soon be known as Genghis Khan. He didn't come bearing gifts of gold or horses. He came to offer his service, his loyalty, and his life. He started as a simple doorkeeper, a guard for the Khan's tent. It was a lowly position, but it gave him unparalleled access to the heart of power. He listened, he learned, and he observed the intricate dance of tribal politics and military strategy. Genghis Khan, a master of recognizing talent, saw something special in the quiet but intensely focused young man. He saw a strategic mind, a relentless spirit. He took Subutai under his wing, and Subutai quickly rose through the ranks. He wasn't just another warrior, he was a student of war. While others relied on brute force, Subutai studied his enemies. He learned their languages, their customs, their strengths, and, most importantly, their weaknesses. He was a master of intelligence gathering, creating vast spy networks that stretched for thousands of miles, giving him a godlike view of the battlefield before a single arrow was ever fired. Subutai wasn't a frontline brawler. In fact, he was often described as overweight in his later years, and he had to be carried into battle in a special cart. His weapon wasn't a sword or a bow, it was his mind. He commanded armies from a distance, like a grandmaster playing a continental game of chess. His pieces were the fearsome Mongol horsemen, and his board was the world itself. His military campaigns are the stuff of legend. He wasn't just about winning battles, he was about annihilating his opponents so completely that they could never rise again. He perfected the art of the feigned retreat, a classic Mongol tactic. His horsemen would pretend to flee in disarray, luring overconfident enemies into a long, exhausting chase. Then, just when the enemy was stretched thin and disorganized, the signal would be given. The Mongols would turn, fresh reserve forces would appear from seemingly nowhere, and the trap would spring. The hunters would become the hunted, surrounded and utterly destroyed. One of his earliest and most devastating campaigns was against the Khwarezmian Empire, a vast and powerful kingdom in Central Asia. The Shah of Khwarezm thought the Mongols were just another band of steppe nomads. He made the fatal mistake of underestimating them, executing Mongol envoys and sparking the wrath of Genghis Khan. Genghis unleashed Subutai. Subutai didn't just march his army across the desert, he outsmarted it. He led a force of 20,000 men on an impossible, secret march through the Kizilkum Desert, considered impassable by the Khwarezmians. He emerged from the sands like a ghost, appearing behind enemy lines and sacking the great city of Bukhara. The shock was absolute. It was a strategic masterstroke that shattered the enemy's morale and spelled the beginning of the end for their empire. After the fall of Khwarezmia, Subutai embarked on what is arguably the greatest cavalry reconnaissance mission in history. With another brilliant general, Jeeb, he led a force of 20,000 horsemen on an 8,000-kilometer ride around the Caspian Sea. This wasn't a simple raid, it was a deep penetration into unknown territory. They swept through the Caucasus, smashing the armies of Georgia and the Cumans. They then entered the lands of the Rus, what is now Russia and Ukraine. At the Battle of the Kalka River, Subutai and Gebe faced a coalition of Rus princes who had assembled a force more than double their size. Using their classic feigned retreat, they lured the overconfident Rus army on a 9-day chase before turning and crushing them completely. The princes of Rus learned a brutal lesson: the Mongols were unlike any enemy they had ever faced. After Genghis Khan's death, Subutai continued to serve his successor, Ogadai Khan. And it was here that he planned his most audacious campaign yet, the invasion of Europe. This was Subutai's magnum opus. He wasn't just a commander, he was the supreme strategist, planning a multi-pronged invasion that would strike Europe from several directions at once. His goal wasn't just to raid, it was to conquer. He sent spies deep into Europe 4 years beforehand, gathering intelligence on the political rivalries, the terrain, and the military capabilities of the European kingdoms. He knew more about Hungary and Poland than their own kings did. In the winter of 1241, the Mongol storm broke over Europe. It was a blitzkrieg, centuries before the term was invented. One Mongol army, led by Baidar and Kaidan, crushed a combined Polish and German army of knights at the Battle of Legnica. The Europeans, clad in heavy armor, were slow and cumbersome compared to the swift Mongol horse archers. The Mongols encircled them, rained arrows upon them, and annihilated them. The head of the European commander, Henry the Pious, was paraded on a spear. Meanwhile, Subutai himself led the main force into Hungary. At the Battle of Mohi, he faced a massive Hungarian army led by King Bela IV. Subutai's genius was on full display. He used a smoke screen to cover his army's crossing of the Sajo River and then executed a perfect encirclement. The Hungarian camp became a slaughterhouse. In just a few hours, an army of nearly 70,000 was wiped out. It was one of the most decisive and one-sided victories in military history. Europe was in a state of sheer panic. The path to Vienna, and perhaps even Rome, lay open. The Pope called for a new crusade, not against the Saracens, but against these new devil's horsemen from the east. Europe held its breath, believing the end of days had come. And then, the Mongols vanished. Just as suddenly as they had appeared, they turned back. Why? The great Khan, Ogadai, had died back in Mongolia. According to Mongol law, all princes of the bloodline had to return to the capital, Karakoram, to elect a new Khan. Subutai, ever loyal, had no choice but to withdraw his armies. It was a political formality that saved Europe from total subjugation. Subutai planned to return. He spent his final years planning a second invasion, one that would finish the job. But he died before his plans could be realized. So what was Subutai's secret? It was simple: planning, discipline, and adaptation. He never fought a battle he hadn't already won in his mind. He used spies, engineers, psychological warfare, and logistics with a level of sophistication that was centuries ahead of his time. He coordinated armies across hundreds of miles using a system of messengers, a military internet of the 13th century. He was a pioneer of combined arms tactics, seamlessly integrating heavy and light cavalry, archers, and siege engineers. For over 40 years, Subutai rode at the forefront of the Mongol conquests. His campaigns stretched from the frozen steppes of Siberia to the plains of Hungary, from Korea to Persia. The sheer scale of his operations is staggering, and matched by any other general in history, including Alexander the Great or Napoleon Bonaparte. He wasn't a king who inherited an army, he was a blacksmith's son who built an empire with strategy and steel. He was the loyal dog of war, the unseen hand that guided the Mongol horde, and the general who made the world tremble. The next time you hear the name Genghis Khan, remember the man who stood beside him, the strategic genius who turned the Khan's vision of a world empire into a terrifying reality. Remember Subutai. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe for more stories about the hidden figures of history. See you next time.